I didn't think much of it the first night I heard something moving in my backyard. At first, I thought it was just an animal. But animals don't stop moving the second you turn on the light. I live in a pretty quiet neighborhood in the US, the kind where nothing really happens. It's a row of older houses, spaced just far enough apart that you have privacy, but close enough that you recognize your neighbor's cars without thinking about it. My place sits at the end of a short street, with a fenced backyard that backs up to a thin stretch of trees. It's not the woods exactly, more like a neglected strip of land the city never developed. Still, it's dense enough that once it gets dark, you can't see more than a few feet into it. That's where all of this started. It was late, somewhere around 11:30 p.m. I remember because I had just finished watching something and was getting ready to shut everything down for the night. My living room lights were off, and the only thing illuminating the house was the TV glow. That's when I heard it. A faint dragging sound coming from outside. Not loud, just wrong. At first, I ignored it. Houses make noise, wind shifts things, animals get into trash. You learn not to react to every little sound, especially when you live alone. But then it came again. A slow scrape, like something being pulled across the ground. I muted the TV and sat there, listening. Nothing. Just when I was about to unmute it and forget the whole thing, there it was again. Closer this time. Not loud enough to be obvious, but enough that I couldn't convince myself it was nothing anymore. I got up and walked toward the back door. The backyard light switch is just inside, next to the sliding glass door. I remember hesitating before turning it on, like some part of me already knew I didn't want to see whatever was out there. Still, I flipped it. The light flooded the yard instantly, and the noise stopped. That was the first thing that bothered me. Whatever had been making that sound, moving, dragging, whatever it was, it stopped immediately. Not a gradual stop. Not like something running away. Just silence. I stood there for a few seconds, staring out through the glass. The yard looked normal. The grass hadn't been cut in a couple of weeks, so it was a little uneven, but nothing out of place. The fence was intact. No movement near the tree line. I even opened the door slightly, just enough to listen. Nothing. After a minute, I convinced myself it was probably a raccoon or something that got spooked by the light. I shut the door, locked it, and went to bed. But I didn't sleep well that night. The next night, it happened again. This time, earlier, around 10 p.m. Same sound, same slow, dragging noise. Only this time, I didn't wait as long. I went straight to the door and turned on the light. Again, silence. I stepped closer to the glass, trying to see if anything had moved, if the grass was disturbed, anything. That's when I noticed something I hadn't seen before. A patch of flattened grass near the middle of the yard. It wasn't huge, maybe 3 or 4 feet across, but it looked fresh, like something had been pressed down there recently. I stared at it longer than I probably should have. Then I did something I still regret. I opened the door and stepped outside. The air was cold, quieter than usual. No insects, no distant traffic, just that still, heavy silence that makes your ears ring. I walked slowly toward the flattened patch. Every step felt louder than it should have. When I got there, I crouched down and ran my hand over the grass. It was damp. Not just from dew. It felt recently disturbed, like something had been there. I remember looking toward the tree line then. The darkness there felt thicker somehow, like it was hiding something just out of sight. I stood up and backed away, suddenly very aware of how exposed I was standing in the middle of my own yard. I went back inside, locked the door, and double-checked the windows. That night, I kept the backyard light on. Over the next few days, things escalated. The sound started happening earlier. Then it started happening during the day. Not as loud, not as obvious, but enough that I'd catch it out of the corner of my attention. A faint scrape, a shift. Every time I checked, nothing was there. But the yard was changing. More patches of flattened grass started appearing, not randomly either. They seemed to form a rough path, leading from the tree line toward the house. That's when I started getting uneasy. I told myself it could still be an animal, something large maybe. But animals don't move in straight, deliberate paths like that. And they don't come back night after night. I considered putting up a camera. I even looked into it online. But part of me didn't want to confirm what I was starting to suspect, that something wasn't right. About a week after the first night, I woke up to a noise. It was around 2 a.m. At first, I didn't even know what had woken me. I just had that sudden alert feeling, like my body knew something was wrong before my mind caught up. Then I heard it. Not in the yard. Closer. Right outside the back door. That same dragging sound, only louder now. Slower. Deliberate. I sat up in bed, completely still. The sound came again. Scrape. Pause. Scrape. I could picture it in my head, something moving just inches from the door. I didn't get up right away. I just listened, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it might give me away. Then something else happened. A soft, dull thud against the glass. Not loud, not aggressive. Just a knock. I don't know how long I sat there after that. It could have been seconds. It felt like minutes. Eventually, I forced myself out of bed. Every instinct told me not to go near that door. But I did anyway. I moved slowly down the hallway, keeping the lights off. The living room was dark, but the outline of the sliding glass door was visible from the faint light outside. The backyard light was off. I hadn't turned it off. I know I hadn't. That's when I stopped. Because I realized something. To turn that light off, you have to be inside the house. The switch isn't accessible from outside. I stood there, trying to process that when I heard it again. This time, from inside. A faint scrape. Behind me. I turned around so fast I nearly lost my balance. The hallway behind me was empty. But the sound had definitely come from inside the house. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. Then I heard it again. From the kitchen. Slow. Careful. Like something or someone was trying not to make noise. That's when survival instinct finally kicked in. I backed away, keeping my eyes on the dark hallway, and reached for my phone. I remember fumbling with it, nearly dropping it as I tried to dial. Before I could hit the call button, something shifted in the kitchen. A shadow moved. Not clearly, not enough to make out details, but enough to know I wasn't alone. I didn't stay to confirm anything. I ran. Straight out the front door, barefoot, phone in hand, not even bothering to lock it behind me. I didn't stop until I was halfway down the street. The police didn't find much. No signs of forced entry. Nothing obviously stolen. But they did find something in the backyard. Near that flattened patch of grass. Marks. Long, shallow grooves in the dirt. Like something heavy had been dragged repeatedly along the same path, leading toward the house. And inside, there were faint scuff marks on the kitchen floor. Dirt tracked in, not from the front door, from the back. I never went back to that house. I stayed with someone else for a while, then moved entirely. For a long time, I tried to convince myself it had been some kind of break-in. Someone watching the house, testing it, eventually getting inside. But that doesn't explain everything. It doesn't explain how they got in without forcing anything. It doesn't explain the light, or the timing, or the fact that for days, maybe longer, something had been coming into my yard, following the same path over and over again. Getting closer, learning. There's one more thing I didn't tell the police. Something I noticed right before I left that night. When I ran past the kitchen, I caught a glimpse of the floor near the back door. At the time, I didn't stop to think about it, but later, it stuck with me. The dirt on the floor wasn't random. It formed a pattern, like footprints, but not normal ones. They were too long, too narrow, and spaced too far apart. Like whatever had been walking in my house wasn't walking the way a person should. I used to think the worst thing about my backyard was how quiet it got at night. No dogs barking, no cars passing, just silence. Now I know silence isn't empty. Sometimes it means someone is trying very hard not to be heard. I live in a suburban area in the US, the kind where every house has the same layout. Front yard, driveway, fenced backyard. Nothing special. Mine backs up to another row of houses, but there's a narrow drainage ditch between us, lined with overgrown bushes and a few scattered trees. During the day, it's nothing. At night, it turns into a dark strip where anything could stand and you wouldn't see it unless you were right on top of it. I never thought much about it until a few weeks ago. It started with my dog. He's not the kind to bark at nothing. Usually calm, barely reacts to squirrels or passing people. But one night, around 9:45 p.m., he suddenly went rigid near the back door. Not barking, just staring. His ears were up, body tense, low growl in his throat. I figured maybe there was a stray cat or something outside. It happens. So I walked over, glanced through the glass door. Nothing. The yard looked normal. Fence, patio, a couple of chairs, and the dark outline of the bushes beyond. I opened the door slightly, expecting him to rush out. He didn't move. That was the first thing that felt off. I nudged him, tried to encourage him outside. He backed away instead, still staring past me, like he didn't want to get any closer to whatever was out there. That made me pause. I stepped outside alone. The air felt heavier than usual. No wind, no distant noise, nothing. Just that thick stillness that makes you aware of your own breathing. I stood there for maybe 10 seconds. Then I heard something shift. Not in my yard. Beyond the fence. A soft crunch, like someone stepping on dry leaves. I leaned closer to the fence, trying to see through the gaps. "Hello?" I called out, half expecting a neighbor or someone cutting through. No response, but I felt it. That unmistakable feeling that someone was standing there, just out of sight, watching me. I went back inside and locked the door. My dog didn't move from that spot for the next hour. Over the next few days, he kept doing the same thing. Every night around the same time, he'd go to the back door and just stare. Sometimes he'd growl softly. Other times he'd just sit there completely still, like he was listening. I started checking outside more often. Every time, nothing. But the feeling never went away. That someone was there. One night, I decided to leave the backyard light off. Usually I'd turn it on automatically when it got dark, but I wanted to see if anything changed. Around 10 p.m., my dog went to the door again. This time, he let out a low bark. Not loud, not aggressive. More like a warning. I stayed where I was, watching him. He took a step back from the door, then another, like something on the other side had moved closer. That's when I heard it. A faint tap against the glass. I froze. Another tap. Slow, controlled. Not like something bumping into it accidentally. Like someone deliberately touching the door. I didn't move toward it. I just stood there, staring at the dark reflection of my own living room in the glass. Then very slowly, something changed in that reflection. A shape. Faint. Distorted. Standing just outside the reach of the light. I couldn't make out details, just a darker patch against the darkness. But it was tall and still. watching. I reached for the light switch and flipped it on. The yard lit up instantly. Nothing was there. No one near the door. No movement. No sound. Just an empty yard. But my dog was backing away, tail low, eyes fixed on the same spot. I didn't sleep much that night. The next morning, I checked the backyard more carefully. That's when I noticed the footprints. They weren't clear impressions, more like disturbed patches in the grass leading from the fence toward the house. And then back again, like someone had walked up to the door and then left. I told myself it could be anything, a neighbor, maybe someone cutting through. But who walks into someone's backyard, up to their door at night? And why not knock normally? A couple nights later, things got worse. I was in the kitchen around 11 p.m. when I heard something metallic shift outside, like the fence latch being touched. I turned off the lights inside and looked out carefully. At first, I didn't see anything. Then I noticed the gate. It was slightly open. I always keep it closed. Always. I stared at it for a long time, trying to convince myself I had just forgotten. Then it moved. Just a little. A slow creak, like someone was pushing it further open. From the outside. I stepped back immediately, my heart racing. I didn't go out there. I didn't call out. I just locked every door and window in the house. That night, I stayed up. Around 1:30 a.m., I heard footsteps. In the backyard. Slow. Measured. Not trying to hide anymore. I could hear them moving across the grass, getting closer to the house. Then stopping. Then moving again. Like whoever it was pacing. I grabbed my phone, ready to call the police. But I hesitated. Because the footsteps didn't sound random. They followed a pattern. Back and forth. Back and forth. Right behind the house. Like they were waiting. The next morning, I finally called someone to come check things out. They didn't find much. No signs of forced entry. No damage. Just more disturbed grass. And the gate slightly off its hinge, like it had been pushed too hard. They told me to keep my doors locked and maybe install cameras. I said I would, but I didn't. Part of me didn't want to see what those cameras might capture. The final night is the one I can't explain. It was raining lightly. Not enough to make noise, but enough to soften the ground. Around midnight, my dog started whining. Not growling this time. Whining. Like he was scared. I went to the back door and looked out. The yard was darker than usual because of the rain clouds. But I could still make out the fence. And the gate. It was wide open. I hadn't gone outside. I hadn't touched it. And then I saw it. A figure. Standing just inside the yard. Not moving. Facing the house. I couldn't see details, just a silhouette against the faint light. I didn't turn on the backyard light this time. I don't know why. Something told me not to. Instead, I just stood there, barely breathing. After a few seconds, the figure moved. Not toward the house, but sideways, slowly, dragging one foot slightly with each step, back and forth, following that same pattern I had heard the night before. That's when it hit me. They weren't just wandering. They were measuring, counting steps, learning the space. I stepped back quietly, trying not to make noise. But the floor creaked under my foot, and the movement outside stopped immediately. I froze. Seconds passed. Then the figure turned. Even from that distance, I could feel it. It was looking directly at me. Through the glass. Through the dark. Like it knew exactly where I was standing. I left that night. Didn't pack much. Just grabbed what I could and drove. I didn't go back alone after that. When I finally returned with someone else the next day, Everything looked normal, except for one thing: the backyard. Because the rain had made the ground soft enough to hold clear impressions. Footprints. Dozens of them, not just near the door. All over the yard, in straight lines, back and forth, overlapping, like someone had been walking the same paths over and over again. For hours, maybe longer. But that's not the part that stuck with me. What I can't stop thinking about is where the footprints started. They didn't come from the gate. They didn't come from the fence. They started right in the middle of the yard, as if someone had already been there, standing still, before they started moving.